One of the most famous poems that Constantine Cavafy ever wrote is a poem called Waiting for the Barbarians. Waiting for the Barbarians was one of his early poems. It was collected with The Windows and a few other early poems in his unpublished Poems 1910 that he put together, in 1910. And Waiting for the Barbarians has a very unique structure. I don't actually know of another poem that's quite like it. Sylvia Plath maybe has a poem or two that comes close, but of course Cavafy predates Plath by a few decades. Let's look at Waiting for the Barbarians. What are we waiting for, assembled in the forum? The barbarians arrive today. Why then such inactivity in the Senate? Why do the senators sit back and not legislate? Because the barbarians arrive today. What sort of laws now can the Senate enact? When the barbarians come, they'll do the legislating. Why is our emperor up and about so early, and seated at the grandest gate of the city, upon the throne in state, wearing the crown? Because the barbarians will arrive today, and the emperor expects to receive their leader. Indeed, he has prepared to present him with a parchment scroll. Thereon he has invested him with many names and titles. Why have our two consuls and the praetors come out today in their purple embroidered togas? Why did they put on bracelets studded with amethysts and rings with resplendent glittering emeralds? Why are they carrying today precious staves carved exquisitely in gold and silver? Because the barbarians will arrive today, and such things dazzle the barbarians. And why don't our worthy orators, as always, come out to deliver their speeches, to have their usual say? Well, because the barbarians will arrive today, and they get bored with eloquence and orations. Why has there suddenly begun all this commotion and this confusion? How solemn people's faces have become. Why are the streets and the squares emptying so swiftly, and everyone is returning home in deep preoccupation? Because night has fallen, and the barbarians have not come, and some people have arrived from the frontiers and said that there are no barbarians anymore. And now, what will become of us without barbarians? Those people were some sort of a solution. This poem, as you can see, is in the form of a question and answer. The questions are all preceded by a M dash, which indicates one speaker, and then the answers are all inset, indented in slightly shorter lines without the M dash in front of them. And we have this series of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 question and answer. And then we have a little couplet at the end that's in a separate section from the questions and answers. The questions and answers range from, one line of questioning to one line of answering in the first set. And then we have 2 lines of questions and then 3 lines of answer, 3 lines of questions, 4 lines of answer. And then we have 6 lines of questions and 2 lines of answer. 2 and 2, 4 and 3. So it's not quite a uniform pattern overall. So what's going on with this? Well, we know, as we've talked about before, that Constantine Cavafy really loved to give these portraits in time of people, a particular people in a particular place in history. And he's very, very interested, especially in Greek history and in the history of the Byzantine Empire, or as they would have called themselves, the Eastern Roman Empire. And this term barbarian, of course, goes back to ancient Greece. Barbarian is this idea that it's basically the non-Greek, the non-Hellene. And I think that at least the legend is, I'm not exactly sure how accurate this is, but the legend is that when Greeks would hear non-Greeks talking, it just sounded like they were saying bar, 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 bar. And so they called them barbarians. So what's going on in this poem? Well, it seems to be set at some point in the Byzantine Empire when there's a expectation of visitors from barbarian lands. And the question and answer, as we see, goes from someone wondering, like, why is everyone here waiting? What are they doing? Why is normal life stopped? And the answerer is saying, well, we're waiting for the barbarians, and it's affecting all the aspects of running the city. And then, of course, at the end, the barbarians do not come, and there's this rueful conclusion that they were a sort of solution. But in the midst of this question and answer, which almost we could see as like, it's almost like a little play, we get, in Cavafy's sly style, a wonderful portrait that becomes more and more intricate and detailed of what life is like in the Byzantine Empire in this age. And, this could be any time, I think, probably from, the 5th century through, up to the 13th or 14th century before the fall of Constantinople. So we start with, what are we waiting for assembled in the forum? The barbarians arrive today. So we're in the forum. We're in the central marketplace. Why then such inactivity in the Senate? Why do the senators sit back and not legislate? Okay, so this is interesting. We now have a focus on the legal life of this Greek city. Because the barbarians will arrive today, the answer goes, what sort of laws can the Senate enact? Okay, so this expectation of the barbarians is affecting lawmaking. When the barbarians come, they'll do the legislating is interesting. It almost sounds like, well, is this Greek people group going to overrule to the barbarians? Now, it is true that there is this struggle back and forth between the Eastern Roman Empire and barbarians. So there's this sort of like the barbarians, it's not like they're afraid of the barbarians. They're kind of holding their breath. They're waiting. Civilization almost seems on hold. We see this with the emperor then. It's not just the Senate that's on hold. The emperor, he's up early. He wants to present a parchment scroll with many names and titles to the barbarians. There's almost this sense of appeasing the barbarians. Oh, hey, we'll give you lots of titles as long as you don't, hurt us. And yet there's this sense that maybe we'll let them be in charge. So in this fourth exchange, we have this wonderful description of the consuls and praetors, who would be these kind of mid-level rulers and administrators in the empire. We have their purple embroidered togas, bracelets studded with amethysts, rings with resplendent glittering emeralds, precious staves carved exquisitely in gold and silver. Cavafy could have just, given us this description and said this, how beautiful Byzantium was. But he couches these descriptions in this kind of almost comic or like satirical question and answer form, which makes them striking, and I think also makes us more able to pay attention to and be interested in them because they're in this sort of narrative, dramatic structure. Such things dazzle the barbarians, the answer says, which is, there's a little bit of this kind of I think we could talk about the other in this. The barbarians are the other. They're this other that will do the legislating. They're this other that will try and flatter with titles and names. They're this other that maybe doesn't understand and will be awed by our magnificence. But then, of course, they don't really see or understand the things that maybe we are impressed by. So why don't our worthy orators, as always, come out and deliver their speeches? Well, the barbarians arrive today and they get bored with eloquence and orators. So there's this little bit of, we're maybe making them seem exotic, but also making them seem a little dumber than us. It's a complicated view of the barbarians, probably not inaccurate to many Greek views throughout history of the barbarians. And then finally, we have this question of, what's all this commotion? Something new seems to be taking place. We don't have a description a narrative description of, and then all the people in the marketplace started worrying and there was commotion. We just have this question, which paints for us this narrative portrait of commotion, confusion, how solemn people's faces have become. Why are the streets and squares emptying swiftly? So we have this narrative movement that these conversers are looking at. And then we have this kind of disappointment because night has fallen and the barbarians have not come. If it was just that, it would be sad. But then there's this almost, culturally bewildering statement. Some people have arrived from the frontiers and said that there are no barbarians anymore. And now what will become of us without barbarians? Those people were some sort of a solution. I think at first, this can be read as the barbarians were a solution because we were going to let them legislate. They were giving us a break from, maybe a temporary break while we waited, or maybe even a permanent break from having to administrate and rule and do all the things that Greek society does that maybe we're tired of, or maybe we think are not working as well as they could and we'd like someone else in charge. But this idea that there are no more barbarians, I think, isn't just now they can't help us in the way we wanted them to. But also this acknowledgement that, the world isn't divided like we thought it was. We thought there were Greeks and barbarians. They were the other. They were maybe less educated than us, but also more exotic and cool than us. Maybe they would hurt us, so we need to placate them. Maybe they have great foreign ideas and they could bring their wisdom to us. But if there is no other, if there is no foreign people who will come in and fix us or dazzle us or even hurt us, then what do we do? What do we do if there's no cultural other? This is a question, of course, that I think is particularly interesting at the outset of the 20th century. This poem is being written a few years before World War I, where we have really, the Greek people and the Greek armies are involved in World War I. The Greeks had been fighting the Turks for a long time, and we actually have the final fall of the Ottoman Turkish Empire at the end of World War I. Of course, this is before that, but I think Cavafy is anticipating that there are these big cultural changes that have bewildered Greek civilization throughout the past, and that will still go on bewildering and changing our concepts of ourselves because our concepts of the other change. So all of this is going on in Waiting for the Barbarians. There's a famous J.M. Coetzee, or Kedzie, I'm not sure how to say his last name, novel called Waiting for the Barbarians that's named after this poem. Do you like this poem? It's an odd poem. What do you think of it? Does it work well for you? Let me know down in the comments. And thanks for hanging out with us as we continue to explore the poetry of Constantine Cavafy.